Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means some smart talk radio is in your future. In this segment, we love animals, do we not? And if you don't love animals, turn the radio off. This is all about animals. I'm very, very pleased to have with us Dr. Judy Morgan. She is the author of several books and a co-host of a podcast on holistic pet care. And she is a veterinarian. If you have not guessed that by now, she is a very strong believer in take care of animals in a holistic manner. And we're going to talk all things dogs, cats, and who knows, other things as well. Dr. Judy, so to speak, how are you, my friend?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
You know, always curious as to doctors get to talk to patients, and the patients can talk back, at least in their language. How did you make the decision to become a vet? And tell us about your trail into vet school.
It's actually a pretty funny story because when I went to undergrad, I've wanted to be a veterinarian since I was about 12 years old. And so I was very, very focused on that. And when I was in undergraduate at Rutgers University in New Jersey, they kept saying to us, you're not going to get in, you're not going to get in. At that point, it was very, very difficult. It was about 1 in 13 applicants got in, and it was still very much a man's field. So, based on that, my advisors kept saying, well, it's much easier to get into medical school. You should apply to medical school as a backup. And so I thought, okay. So I took a human anatomy class, and I went to the library, and I got out this human anatomy book, and it had the body cut in cross sections. And I took one look at that. I thought I was going to vomit. I slammed the book and said, I can't go to med school. I'll never make it to anatomy class. So there was no option,
Okay.
Which was fine because I really only wanted to work on animals anyway. So, and I've never looked back and never regretted it.
Well, I would think the cover or the furry world of animals is pleased that you're there. Are there I'm just curious, as a vet, when they say small animal versus large animal, give us a definition of that.
So large animals, we generally think about farm animals. So that could be, pigs, cows, horses, sheep, goats. Even though there are now, the pot-bellied pigs and the pygmy pigs, and there's miniature horses, which I happen to own 2 of those, they're still considered, quote, large animals, whereas the small animals would be more like dogs, cats, and the small furry exotics.
Let's also, again, I mentioned at the top that you are very into holistic methods of treatment and looking at care for animals. Share with our Lewis at Large listeners, if you would, what is that, and how is that a departure from maybe the traditional veterinary care?
So basically, when you go to a traditional veterinarian, they'll look at your pet and they'll do diagnostics and they'll say, oh, he's got kidney disease. We need to treat the kidney disease. Whereas if you go to a holistic doctor, they're going to look more at the animal as a whole. And they might say, well, like for instance, might say, well, his kidneys aren't working as well as they should, but that's also causing him to have a drier coat, and it's causing him to drink more water, and it's causing him to have an off and on appetite. And look, his pads are dry, his nose is dry, his eyes are dry. And so we're going to look at the entire animal, and we're going to try to treat things, that are going to help the whole animal, and we're going to look at more the root cause rather than just putting Band-Aids on the overall symptom. So I'm going to try to heal that body as much as possible from within, and I'm going to try to do it without using medication, without using processed pet food. So I use whole, real foods for treatment. I use herbs. I use homeopathics. I'm going to use things that should have less side effects and less, more problems. When you see those drug commercials on TV and the last 30 seconds of the commercial is all the side effects and problems and, oh boy, it might kill you, we're trying to avoid that.
Right, okay. I'm curious, Dr. Morgan, your peer group, the local peers in the community where you practice in New Jersey and others in the practice, do they look at you as, oh, stop doing that, that's not right at all, or wow, this is trailblazing, we can learn? What's the reaction?
Well, I was holistic long before it was cool to be holistic. So they used to look at me like I was a little crazy, and what the other veterinarians in the area would do is they would send me their disaster cases that were dying and they had nothing left to offer, and they would say, well, go see her, she might have something. And the the bad thing or good thing, I don't know, I usually did have something. And so whether it was acupuncture or herbs or food or just, gently helping them through the last phase of their life, people started to see that there was something to that. And so now there are a lot more pet owners who are looking for alternative care. And so what I've found in my area is almost every veterinary practice within a 25-mile radius has sent one of their doctors to learn acupuncture because that's the most respected of the alternative treatments that's out there. But the problem is if you have a traditional practice that's really traditional and you have one person who does acupuncture, they may be giving your dog acupuncture treatments, but then they also may be prescribing medications that are causing more side effects and more problems. They might be giving you processed prescription diets that are also causing more trouble. And again, they're still not treating the root cause. So I would say that a lot of my peers look at it and say, okay, there's something to this because she's getting longevity and health, and hey, the clients really like her and the pets really like her. What's going on there? I think they're a little frustrated by the fact that, when they open that avenue up in their practice, they don't get the same results. And it's because you have to really look at the whole thing, not just one little part of it.
Again, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. This segment got a good one going here with holistic veterinarian Dr. Judy Morgan, and she treats animals of all small animals of all kinds in New Jersey, and has written numerous books on the subject. She's also the co-host of a podcast on holistic pet care. We'll find out all that contact information towards the end of the interview here. Dr. Judy, am I wrong that figures are basically telling us that pets, dogs, cats, etc., are more popular and owned by more and more Americans than ever before? Do you find that to be true?
Absolutely.
Any particular reason for that?
We've got all those baby boomers who are now empty nesters for the most part. And so what do you fill your home with? I mean, look at me. My kids have grown up and moved out, and so I've got 9 dogs and 4 cats that moved in. We all want to give love and receive love, and pets are a wonderful way to do that. A lot of younger people are putting off, young professionals, they're putting off having families, but they want that companionship. So, a cat or a small dog is the perfect way to do that.
What about, do you have I'm just curious, in your particular practice, does it matter to you, dog or cat? Is there any particular breed or any particular kind of animal that's easier to treat, so to speak, than another?
Well, dogs are definitely easier to treat because cats are kind of unique individuals. They're not small dogs. I can make up a new diet and food therapy for a dog, and the dog says, "Oh, boy, you cooked me something. I love you. That's great." You do that for a cat, and they go, "What's this? I don't like that. I'm not going to eat that." Ew. So cats are really difficult. Cats don't like to travel to the veterinarian. They don't like to get in the car. They don't like to get in the box. They don't necessarily like to be handled by strangers. I love cats. I have my own cats. But they are definitely can be more difficult to deal with, whereas dogs are just, they kind of go with the flow.
I think part of this conversation too is, and let's for the 1 or 2 people out there that do not own a pet but are thinking about one, I know you have some strong feelings, of course, about where those pets should come from or could come from, and some opportunities out there that maybe some people don't know regarding rescue organizations and others. Why don't you share your view on that, and how can somebody that's looking to add an animal to their home, what are some alternatives for them?
So I'm a huge proponent of rescue. I got involved in the rescue world about 15 years ago, and I've never looked back. And for me personally, I absolutely love adopting senior dogs. So generally, we consider senior anything 7 years and over, but I think that needs to be revamped because a lot of these 7-year-old dogs are living to be 17, so you're getting basically a full lifespan. But rescue organizations have really become very, very popular, and you can find a rescue organization for any breed. I personally am in love with Cavalier King Charles Spaniels and English Toy Spaniels and Cocker Spaniels, so I do rescue work for all of those. And, sometimes I will get in a pregnant mama, so I've got puppies available for adoption. So you can pick whatever breed you want, and you can find it somewhere through a rescue group. The local shelters, if you call them up and say, I'd really like to have a golden retriever or a golden retriever mix, can you put me on the list if you get one in? You should go check out your local shelter, look at Pet Finder, look at the rescue groups. Not everybody is reputable. You have to do your homework, but a lot of times when you get a pet through rescue, particularly if it's an adult that's been turned in, a lot of times they've lived in foster care. So the foster parents have taken care of the housebreaking and teaching them to walk on a leash and teaching them some manners, and they know the pluses and minuses of each individual dog. So you can say, well, I live in an apartment and I need a dog this size, and it has to be one who's not real barky, and it has to be one that can go up and down steps. And so they can tailor the individual pet to what you need.
What about, you mentioned millennials are waiting a little bit longer to have kids and sort of get established. Any difference in the generations in terms for either the breeds of dogs and or cats that they do, or cats versus dogs, or other small animals versus the traditional dog and cat based on just their age?
I think a lot of the millennials, because a lot of them are, kind of the young professionals, and they're not home a lot, and they've got apartments, they tend to gravitate toward cats because the cats are independent and they're good at apartment living in general. So, if you're gone for 8 or 10 hours during the day, your cat's kind of like, they'll be home. Whereas, somebody has to walk the dog. So I think that maybe they might tend a little more toward cats or small dogs, but we're finding them kind of across the board. Everybody has their one breed that they tend to gravitate toward, and so whether that's a pit bull or a German Shepherd or a Great Dane, whatever, sometimes it's what they grew up with, but I think that cats and apartment dwellers tend to be leading.
What about, and again, I'm going to go back now just to your work specifically as a veterinarian. What medical science for human has certainly made extraordinary strides over the last decade. What about for animals? What are some big medical strides in your world that you see that share with our listeners maybe some things they might not have even have thought about?
Oh, man. If it's available for people, it's pretty much available for animals. For instance, in my clinics, we've started doing stem cell therapy where we actually harvest the stem cells and process them and then re-inject them into joints to give renewed vigor to dogs with arthritis. They're using stem cell therapy for kidney disease. They're doing kidney transplants. They're doing heart valve transplants, prosthetic legs with the 3D printing. You name it, it's pretty much, MRIs, CT scans, they're run-of-the-mill. We send animals for those every day. Ultrasounds we're doing all day, every day. So if it's available in the human field, it's pretty much being done in the animal field pretty quickly. Sometimes the animal field is ahead of the human field because that's where they're kind of doing their groundwork.
Let's also do this. Let's jump now back to the idea of we don't own a pet. We haven't owned a pet. Maybe we're a single couple. Maybe we're a couple with young children, but we're going to go start our search for a pet. Share with our listeners, if you would, give them some strategies, some things to think about as they do their search, some places they can research, and also, again, what kind of things do they need to know just about themselves before they adopt an animal?
Okay. So you need to know what your time schedule is, whether you can deal with an animal that's going to be high energy and need a lot. If you're an outdoor person who goes hiking, then you want to get one of those high energy animals that's going to be able to do that, and you might want a younger animal. If you're an apartment dweller, you're a senior citizen, and you want to get somebody that's company, then you're going to want somebody that's quiet and wants to sit in your lap all day. If you have stairs that you have to go up and down, then you need to consider, is that pet going to be able to go up and down those stairs? If you have small children, you need to look for a breed or a particular animal that is either used to young children or that you can bring up with the children. You need to talk to people who own that particular breed that you're looking for. If you see somebody walking down the street with a Great Dane and you think that would be an awesome, cool dog to own, you better go talk to that person and say, hey, tell me what you need to know about Great Danes. How much do they eat? What's it going to cost me to feed that dog? How much are his vet bills per year? Because it's going to be more for a Great Dane than it is for a Maltese. You can go online and read articles about any of them, and you can call rescue groups and say, hey, tell me about your particular breed. Most really good rescue groups like our Cab Cavalier Group, you can go online to our websites, and we have tons of information about the breed, what kind of medical problems you're looking at, what personality issues you might have, so that you have something in the back of your mind that you can say, well, yeah, that one sounds like that would be a great one for me, or, oh, my God, that would, a St. Bernard in our 200-square-foot apartment, that's never going to work.
Okay. What about, and again, if you just joined us, we're talking to Dr. Judy Morgan. She is a blogger as an outreach of her veterinary medicine practice back in New Jersey. She's also the author of several books on holistic care for animals, and she is a tremendous believer, as you can have heard and can imagine, on the concept of rescue animals as well. Judy, when you think about medicine and the future of veterinary medicine, I'm sure there's lots of science to it. You take a more holistic view. What about young people coming into the profession? Are they interested in veterinary medicine, or is there a need for good vets everywhere?
There's a need for good vets everywhere. We are seeing huge changes, kind of like the mom-and-pop drugstores went the way of the big chains. We're seeing more and more of the individual veterinary practices converting over to being part of the bigger corporate chains, partly because of financial reasons. Sometimes there's more resources available to the bigger groups than there are to the individual owner. But we're also seeing that a lot of the younger graduates don't necessarily want to be practice owners. Owning a business isn't for everyone, and it takes up a lot more time than just being the employed veterinarian. And a lot of people that are coming out say, I really want to just practice medicine. I really don't want to have to be a business person. So we're seeing those kinds of changes in the field, but I think medicine-wise, it is getting better and better all the time. The students that are coming out are exposed to things that weren't even a twinkle in somebody's eye when I was in school. So, I think the quality of medicine just keeps going up and up.
What about, do people still have birds as pets? Maybe it's just me, maybe the people I hang around with. I don't see as many birds in cages screaming out Polly want a cracker as I used to, or is that wrong on my part?
I think there's just as many out there. I don't treat birds. I used to own birds as well, and I have a friend who is an avian veterinarian who happens to be fairly close by, so anytime I had a problem with my birds, I would take them to him. But there's still a big call for that, and, there are some people that just love birds and they can't have, four-legged pets that they have to take out for walks and that sort of thing, so they love having birds. But birds are a huge commitment, too. They really actually need a lot of attention.
Well, as we kind of start to wind down here, I would like you to, again, there are some tremendous veterinarians in our particular listening area, but I would like to have you, if you would, kind of lay out the case for, again, how you practice medicine. And I know you use technology, but again, you also take a very holistic view. Lay out that case for our listeners, if you would.
So one of the big differences with holistic veterinarians is the huge vaccination debate that goes on with children and also with animals. New research is showing that the vaccinations that they receive as puppy and kittens may last them an entire lifetime, and there is absolutely no need to vaccinate every single year. And the ABMA, which is our national organization, now recommends vaccinating no more often than every 3 years. A lot of veterinarians are afraid to go to that because they're afraid that clients will not bring their animals in for that annual examination. So what I would really highly recommend to your listeners is take your animals in every year for that annual exam, because that's the most important thing that you can do to make sure that they haven't developed a heart murmur, that they're not, having hearing issues or eye issues, that they're not developing liver disease or kidney disease. But the vaccinations every year are really going out the window, and so we are fighting really hard to get people to understand that, and that's explained really well in my book, From Needles to Natural, Learning Holistic Pet Healing, and also on my website, drjudymorgan.com, and my Facebook page, Judy Morgan DVM. We are looking to get more toward away from the chemicals for the flea and tick prevention and look at more natural alternatives, not only for the health of our pets and ourselves, but also for our environment. We're killing our environment with all the chemicals that we're using.
Well, we can talk about animals forever, and I have a feeling Dr. Judy could do that with us and probably leave us in the dust here. But We have been talking to Dr. Judy Morgan. She is a practicing vet for more than 3 decades. Author, as she mentioned earlier, she's the author of several books and also has co-hosts a podcast. Again, give us the website again real quick.
drjudymorgan.com, drjudymorgan.com.
All right. Hey, listen, thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate it. And best of luck to you and the 9 animals that live under your... Is it 9 animals or more than that?
13.
13 animals that live under your roof. And do the kids come back at home or do they just stay at a hotel? Now, we're not going back to mom's. We're just staying in a hotel.
They're out on their own.
They're out on their own. Okay. Well, listen, again, thank you so much. We'd love to have you on again.
Thank you so much.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.
It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the Flight Deck, and of course that means some smart talk radio is in your future, and this segment certainly no exception. Very pleased to have with us Owen Gleiberman. He is a movie critic, but he is much more than that. He is a man about town, a man about the United States. He's an American film critic. He wrote for the Boston Phoenix and is best known as the founding movie writer for Entertainment Weekly, where he was a critic for 24 years. He continues to write for BBC.com, lives in New York City with his family, and actually spent some time in the Sunflower State, which we will explore with him. Very happy to have him. Owen, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, Warner. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Well, we're going to talk about your career, also talk about a brand new work you've got out called Movie Freak, My Life Watching Movies. I guess it begs the question, at some point in time, I assume everybody thought, what'd be kind of cool to be a movie critic. But tell us, if nothing else, the professional path that led you to that profession.
Well, I started doing it in college in the late 70s. That's the reason I was in your fair state. I had a newspaper internship in summer of 1979 at the Wichita Eagle Beacon, which was a lot of fun. And it was really the first time I got out of my hometown. And, one of the reasons I wanted to write this book, Movie Freak, is that when you're a movie critic, everybody asks you all the time a million questions, like how many movies do you see a week? What's your favorite movie? But the king of questions I get asked is, so how do you get to be a movie critic? And, after a while, I realized that what people were really asking me when they said that was, what gives you the right to be a critic? Why you and not me? It sounds like the greatest job in the world. What makes you lucky enough that you get to just kind of say your opinion about things and get paid for it? It's a great question, and I wanted to write a book that could answer it and sort of take people inside the life of a critic. I don't really have 100% hardcore answer that justifies why I'm a critic and somebody else isn't. Certainly you have to know a lot about movies, and, you have to be able to write well. That's really the work of the job. It's not seeing movies, it's writing. But really the key to why anyone becomes a critic is about obsession, in a sense. I mean, you really have to be almost obsessed with this art form. And I wanted to write a book that took a deep dive into movie obsession, that really looked at what it's like when you're one of these people like me who at a certain point formed an attachment to movies where they became almost a kind of alternate reality, a virtual reality that you live inside. I think a lot of people identify with that. We're all movie buffs, movie freaks, TV freaks now. I mean, people spend more hours, watching stuff on the small screen than they did even like 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. We're all living our lives through this kind of virtual reality of entertainment. And I wanted to write a book that sort of examined what that's about, what it feels like, what kind of person becomes a movie addict. So, yeah, that's what it's about.
You know, you were talking about sort of content, so to speak, and the virtual reality. Let's, because I want to keep exploring this a little bit, but let's talk about the relatively recent influx of some super quality shows that are hitting the small screen. And we're not making a value judgment, but let's just look at Mad Men or things like Breaking Bad or House of Cards, Game of Thrones, et cetera, et cetera. Do you agree that that is higher quality television? And if it is, does that hold any allure for you, or is it uniquely the experience of the theater and the full-length feature film?
Oh, no, it absolutely holds an allure for me. In fact, first of all, I love most of those shows that you mentioned. I mean, going right back to the show that started it all in terms of the quality era of television, The Sopranos. I'm right now, as we speak, in the middle of watching The People versus O.J. Simpson, and so far I'm completely enthralled by it, just totally sucked in by the intelligence of it. I mean, in a sense, to use it as an example, The People versus O.J. Simpson is the kind of TV movie they might have made 25 years ago, but that would have been 2.5 hours long. This one sprawls out probably, 7 to 10 hours if you add it all up, and that's why it's able to have a detail and a sense of life that the old TV movies didn't. But I wrote a piece in 2000, just as the second season of The Sopranos was airing, where I basically, and I talk about this in the book, and not to pat myself on the back, but where I think I kind of looked ahead pretty smartly in this piece. I said, The Sopranos is basically the best thing ever to happen to television. They finally did it. They made a show that really works on the level of a great movie, like a great Scorsese movie or something like that. So it's revolutionary for television. But I also said in this piece that this may be the worst thing that's ever happened to movies, because what the rise of The Sopranos and other shows like it represents is people shifting their attention for that kind of smart entertainment to the small screen. And more not wanting it from the big screen, wanting to go out to see a movie only to see spectacle, fantasy, the kind of stuff that now fills our multiplexes.
Right.
So I think that there has been a paradigm shift there.
So what you're saying, and by the way, editorial on my end, I completely agree with you. It seems to me that the true great stories are now being told right in 2016 on television, and what you see in the movies are, here's what we can do with our special effects.
Well, I think that is true to a degree, but fortunately, I think great movies are still being made. Now, too many of them, to my mind, are sandwiched in the last 6 weeks of the year. I'd like to see great movies coming out all year round, and what happens is that the industry just needs to kind of tether them to award season. That's why they come out then. But if you look at last year, I think we had some extraordinary films, like the Mad Max film, for instance. I don't think there's anything on television that's the equivalent of that. I mean, I really thought it was just such a spectacle, really deep, really haunting in its way. And other movies like Spotlight or Todd Haynes' movie Carol, best love story of the year I saw by far. I think movies, when they're really working, still have that primal power to move us that I think goes beyond, in a sense, what most of these serial dramas on television do. They're engrossing, but I think movies can really stir us on deep, deep levels, and they still do. I just wish that the film industry had room for more of those kind of films. There's no question that it is now dominated by franchises, popcorn, and things that don't necessarily stir up your feelings that much, that are more just kind of like candy for the eyeballs.
Well, if you just joined us again, yours truly, Warner Lewis, from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio, in the middle of an interesting segment with Owen Gleiberman, well-known movie critic. He was a founding film critic, frankly, at Entertainment Weekly, continues to write, and has a brand new work out called Movie Freak, My Life Watching Movies. Owen, you're in New York. How important, in your opinion, is it for a critic to be well-connected, well-woven, and have a strong awareness of the personalities in the movie industry, be it actors, producers, directors, etc., or is it better to treat it at arm's length?
That's a great question, and I actually love both halves of your question in the following sense. I've discovered over the years that I think it is important for a critic to get to know people in the industry. The irony is that even though I live in New York City, I probably do less of that in New York or Los Angeles than when I just go to film festivals. That is really a chance to get to meet people on all levels of the industry. And when I go to the Sundance Film Festival or the Toronto Film Festival or the Cannes Film Festival, I meet a lot of people and I talk to them and I learn a lot about how the movie industry works. And I think that can only inform your reviews you're writing in a good way. I've also gotten friendly with people over the years. There's a chapter in my book, chapter in Movie Freak, about how in the late 90s, after I'd become a big champion of Oliver Stone's work, I became friends with Oliver Stone. And I hung out with him a lot. I learned a lot about the film industry through him and just had kind of a good time hanging out with him because he was sort of a wild man. At the same time, I discovered that it's awfully hard ultimately to be friends with a filmmaker and be a critic when you have to write about their films. Your job is to be honest. And even if you try to write honestly about when they make a movie that's kind of a mixed bag, you're probably going to take 10% off your fastball. So ultimately, those two things are not that compatible. But, to the second half of your question, there is a part of me that thinks, no, the best way to write a review is to tune everything out, certainly your relationships, but even, what other critics are thinking, just to see a movie and write your review of it almost as if you were on a desert island. That is, in a way, my sort of ideal of what a review is. And it should be very pure. It should really just be from your heart and your gut. And I think a problem with movie reviewing these days, a lot of people talk about how it's proliferating on the web. Everybody's a critic now. You can read 1,000 reviews of any movie. It's, in a sense, put a lot of critics out of work because a lot of people feel like they can get this stuff for free. Why do they even care about whether somebody's a professional critic or not? But the odd thing to me is that you see more reviews, but they all read the same. I feel like so many weeks a movie will come out and I read 100 variations on the same review. I do think there's a certain groupthink mentality and a certain pressure now. I'm suspect of the uniformity that I see. And I see this everywhere. For instance, I wasn't that big a fan of The Big Short. I thought that movie was kind of overrated. I thought Christian Bale was over the top in it. I didn't really think it had that much to say about the 2008 financial crisis. I don't begrudge anybody writing a positive review of that, but I was a little suspect of the uniformity of opinion, the rave reviews for what was to me a sort of middle-of-the-road HBO movie. No more, although it was totally watchable. So, and recently that movie 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, and everyone seemed to agree that the twist ending was great. Well, I think the twist ending was part of the publicity. I didn't think the twist ending was all that great. Once again, I don't begrudge any one person saying that, but I'm a little suspect of the uniformity. I think there's a pressure on critics now to sort of be part of the group because there's safety in numbers, and a lot of them are scared about losing their jobs, and I think they feel more comfortable writing a review and being able to look at their bosses and say, look, everyone else said this too, so you really can't question my opinion.
Owen, I got a question for you. You brought the subject up. Who's your real boss? Is it the movie industry, or is it your publisher, or is it the public? And how much influence, if they all three are at some level, how much influence does each one have?
Well, that is also a great question. I would say that my real boss is my editor. But in another sense, I would say that one of the ways being a critic is a strange profession, and I think it's one of the reasons that people get so fascinated by critics is I think when you're a critic, you don't have a boss in a certain way. I don't think it's the public. I don't think it's the industry. I think if your boss is who you're serving in a certain way, not to be too pretentious about it, but I think when you're a critic, you're serving the truth. You're saying what you really feel. And I think the second you step back from that, you're not really doing the job. And I think it works the same way that political punditry should. There's 1,000 political pundits out there, but what we could really use more of are the ones who are really telling the truth, really, talking about what the true priorities should be. That's what writers do. So I don't really think about serving any of those interests at all. I think the best way to serve the public is to not think about what the public is thinking. I think you're never, when I hear people, I love to come out of a movie and listen to people talking about it. You hear this sort of babble of opinions as people are walking out of a theater. Well, they're not beholden to anyone. I've heard people say all the time, I heard this movie was good, but I didn't think it was that good. They're being completely honest. I think in a way, when you're a critic, if you're really independent in your thinking, then you're never closer to being part of the public than when you're doing that. That's what people do. Why shouldn't you do that as a critic? The second you think about trying to psych out the public and get ahead of what they're thinking, you're not being true to yourself, and I don't think you're serving them either.
We're with Owen Gleiberman, again, well-known movie critic, brand new work called Movie Freak, My Life Watching Movies. Owen, what about, kind of along these same lines, a sports writer may write a negative column about a player or a coach and gets the cold shoulder from them. I'm curious as to, if you write a negative review, do you get the cold shoulder from, again, the directors, the studio, or the actors, or do they recognize it's part of the deal?
I think they recognize it's part of the deal. But I think there's a certain pressure on television critics. I mean, one of the reasons you don't really see real movie reviewing on television is that there's more pressure from the studios there because they consider it more of an advertising medium. But I think for print critics or online, they leave us alone. And certainly I have not heard complaints from the studios or filmmakers or actors. I think behind the scenes, though, they get really steamed, really angry, and sometimes you can bruise feelings. And I am sensitive to that. I mean, if there's anything I don't necessarily try to pull my punches as I get older, but the older I've gotten, the more, I think if you're growing up right, you're probably developing a little more empathy as you get older rather than less. And I do have a sense more than ever that all the movies I'm writing about, were very difficult to make and were created by human beings, and you're writing about real people with real feelings. That said, you can't overdo that. If I once had Harvey Weinstein, the fabled former head of Miramax and now the Weinstein Company, chew me out for some review where he said, you have no idea how hard it is to make a movie. And I said to Harvey, well, I actually have developed a pretty good idea of how hard it is to make a movie, any movie. The problem is that if I applied that to reviewing, then I'd never give a bad review. I would just say, hey, they really worked hard at this. So your job, in a way, is not to look at that, it's to look at the movie. The same way the public does. The public isn't sitting there thinking, oh, well, I was bored, but yeah, it was really hard to make that movie. They're just reacting, honestly.
What about, Owen, let's touch on it, and you actually touched on it a little bit earlier, with the proliferation of so much content out there in terms of review content, via social media and other internet avenues and channels. How has that changed your role, or has it at all?
Well, I think it's changed my role in the same way that it's changed a lot of other things. And I will tell you quite openly, in a way that I regret. I sound like I'm speaking completely out of self-interest there, but I think when there were fewer critics, each of them probably had more authority, more voice, were more listened to because there was just less competition. And we now live in a fragmented culture where any one voice probably can speak less loudly. I find it interesting and revealing that people seem to really focus on that issue in regard to film criticism. I mean, I get asked that all the time, and it's really a topic of conversation. But I don't think people focus on it nearly as much when it comes to, say, politics. And there, I think it's even more important. Our fragmented culture has created a political culture where we now not only have a babble of opinions, we have contrasting sets of facts. No one can even agree anymore on what the basic information is. And that's one of the reasons that I think you have the rise of someone like Donald Trump. I don't think you would have had Donald Trump triumphing the way he is now 20 years ago, because the fact that so much of what he says is misinformation would have been a problem. But now nobody even knows what the correct information is, so he can say whatever he wants and change his mind every other minute, and it doesn't matter. I think that's the real product of the fragmentation culture, and the fact that, there's a lot of film criticism around, or maybe too much of it, and the fact that people who are so-called professionals are now competing with amateurs. It's not ultimately a big problem in society, but I think that film criticism, like a lot of other things, was better off when we had fewer voices who were heard more loudly. That sounds like I'm defending almost the aristocratic view or whatever, but it's just the way that I feel. I feel like the internet, I don't know, it's brought a lot of chaos into our lives. And I guess I'm old enough that I remember the earlier era, and I'm thinking in some ways It was better before. But God knows I love writing online. I have no problem with that. I love a lot of aspects of digital culture. It's very freeing in certain ways. But when you're a critic, like any other writer, you want to be heard.
Yeah, well, it means we have to have better filters than we've had in the past. That's for sure. Let's touch on this real quick, and I don't want to hang too long on it. What's your take on the whole controversy at the Oscars and the racial issues that were raised there? Much ado about nothing, or was it very real?
I'm not going to call it much ado about nothing, but I think in many ways it was overstated and misstated. First of all, I don't think the problem is the Academy. I think that, look, just a few years ago, everyone was marveling over the fact that there were a lot of Oscar nominees who were African American. That had to do with the movies that were being made that year. It's the same group of Academy voters. I don't think they suddenly became racist. No, the problem, as a number of people have pointed out, is not the Academy or the Oscars. The problem is the movies that are being made. But I think there's a problem there that people don't acknowledge. When people talk about, well, we need to see more movies with African Americans or more movies that tell the stories of women, I kind of agree with that. But they're not talking about franchise movies. The Star Wars film this year, The Force Awakens, which is the biggest movie of the year, there were two heroes of that. One was, the girl, and the other one was played by an African American actor. If you go to see the latest Fast and Furious franchise sequel, those casts are very multi-ethnic and gender balanced, all that stuff. No, what people are saying is that they want to see more dramas about the lives of African Americans or Hispanics or women. And the problem there is that Hollywood isn't making dramas anymore. They're not making dramas about white men. So that, I think, is the real problem, that we don't have a Hollywood culture of dramas, of serious movies anymore. That has all moved to television. And that, I think, is the real problem. Until that's solved, you're never going to solve the Oscars so white problem or whatever. So in a way, there was a problem there, but I think it was misdiagnosed.
Another question for you here. Look back on your career. You've written reviews that have been glowing, ones that have probably been damning, so to speak. Is there a review that not necessarily you want to take back, but one you wrote and later you saw the film and had a completely different opinion at a later date?
That does happen once in a while, and I have a whole chapter in Movie Freak where I talk about the one that, for me, is the granddaddy of when that happened to me, and that was the film Moulin Rouge. I saw it in the fall of 2001, whatever it was, and had mixed feelings about it. Didn't even consider it for my 10 best of the year list. Didn't really think twice about it. I liked a few things about it. And then a few months into the new year, I went and saw it again because a friend just wanted to see it, and I went along with her, and I just loved it. I thought, wow, this really is the great musical of our time, great love story. I just fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, and I thought, man, if I could do my 10 best list over again, it would be my movie of the year. And I just missed the boat on it, and I really regretted it. I said right then, that's the biggest mistake I ever made. In general, I don't correct myself too much. What I find is that movies I really like just get better and better and better. For instance, when I first saw Gladiator, I thought it was a pretty good movie. I liked it. And that was it. No more, no less. About, 15 years later, when I've seen it maybe 7 or 8 times, I think it's just an extraordinary film. I think Russell Crowe gives the greatest movie star performance in that film that I've seen in the last 30 years. And I didn't necessarily feel that the first time. So, as a critic, your opinions do shift over time. That's fun. I enjoy it when that happens. But on the other hand, you've written a piece and you've committed to it. And so you can kind of look back at certain things you've written with regret. I discovered, though, that readers love that. They love it when critics change their mind because they kind of think we come from this attitude of being up there on high, shouting down at people with our opinions. And I don't really think it's like that. But that is the view, for good or bad, that people have of critics. And they love to see when critics can admit that they're fallible, that we're just human, like everyone else.
Well, as we start to wind down here, we're not going to ever be able to get you in a corner at a cocktail party, so I'll do it for everybody. And we're just real quickly, some quick ones here off the top of your head. I'm going to read a category, throw one out there that you think's one of the best. Let's start with comedy.
A Night at the Opera by the Marx Brothers.
Got good enough. Political.
All the President's Men.
Agreed. Love story.
Woody Allen's Manhattan.
History.
Saving Private Ryan.
Okay. How about sci-fi?
I would say the first thing that jumped to mind was another Spielberg film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Okay.
People don't talk about that movie that much anymore, but man, when that came out in 1977, it was transcendent.
Yeah. And I think people, if they're like me at all, still watch 10, 15 minutes of it all the time, and you can almost know it by heart. It was a tremendous movie.
Absolutely.
What about drama?
Oh, wow. Just so much to choose from. I'm drawing a blank. I don't know. What for you?
Oh, drama. Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Well,
it's tougher than you think, isn't it?
I'll tell you, this is an old one. It's not, for some reason, coming to mind. Double Indemnity was one. I thought, and that's not really drama. It's kind of suspense and all.
No, it is drama. It is drama, though. And actually, of those kind of movies, film noirs, the movies about the femme fatale, Double Indemnity is my very favorite of those. Just one of my favorite films. I'll give you another one. It's a Wonderful Life is to me one of. I mean, everyone loves it as a sentimental holiday classic, but to me, it's one of the 10 greatest films ever made.
I'll tell you a sappy movie that no one's ever heard of, but I bet you have. You ever heard of the movie called The Long Gray Line? Tyrone Power at West Point. It's about check it out sometime. It's kind of an interesting one. He's an Irish immigrant, comes over. Yeah. Anyway, well, listen, I love talking to you, and unfortunately, we are out of time. The book is Movie Freak: My Life Watching Movies by a well-known movie critic, Owen Gleiberman. Hey, Owen, how can people find out, pick up a copy of the book, and also find out more about the work you do?
Well, it's easy. The work I do is on BBC.com, and the book, Movie Freak, is everywhere. You can get it on Amazon. You can find it in Barnes & Noble. It's just out there. And it's really, it's a book about movie passion, movie obsession, and, what it's like to just view your life through all that stuff. So I hope it appeals to all my fellow movie freaks out there.
And one last quick one here. Any movie that you know that's coming out sometime between now and the balance of the year that you think might be a must-see?
Oliver Stone's movie about Edward Snowden.
There you hear.
He's made a drama about the whole Snowden case, and I think that given that those issues are still being debated and Snowden is still over there in Russia, I think, good or bad, that is an Oliver Stone political movie that is going to be a hot button movie. It's going to be, just something that people are going to be very curious to see. It comes out in September.
We'll look forward to it. Again, the book Movie Freak by Owen Gleiberman. Hey, Owen, thanks so much for being our guest, and would love to have you on again sometime.
Thanks, Warner. I really enjoyed it.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.